Okay, well, welcome everyone. Today I've got Ken Speakman. He's the Director of Applied Learning for Mediation Institute and, according to his profile, all-round good guy. And I happen to know that you're also an extremely well-renowned cat herder as well, Ken.
Yes, I do enjoy cat herding.
So Ken's a nationally accredited mediator, family dispute resolution practitioner, and holds qualifications at the graduate diploma in family dispute resolution, a graduate certificate level in neuro-linguistic programming, and also a graduate certificate in commerce. You've got probably a few other credentials as well there, Ken.
Yeah, I remember the certificate level type things, which, yeah, just goes on and on.
Yes. So, look, before we go into what I was wanting to talk to you about today is a little bit particularly around the relationship mediation that you that I know you do and are really passionate about. But before
That's
we
great.
go into that, I'd like to know a little bit more about the sorts of people that you provide mediation services for. So, who are your main clients?
Well, as far as relationship mediation is concerned, the main clients are people or couples that are having major issues in their relationship, but they find that counselling is not their preferred method of trying to deal with them. What I mean by that is that with counselling, you do have there's certain limitations there. There's a lot of good benefits as well, so it's not all one way. But one of the major impactors, I think, is the fact that relationship mediation done in a shorter period of time, that's usually done and dusted within a few days, where with counselling it goes on and on and on. Secondly, with counselling, some people are a bit adverse or not wishing to delve into everything because of, makes them feel, vulnerable or whatever, where with relationship mediation, it's all future focused. We're not looking in what's happened before. We acknowledge what's happened before. And as we say, we can't unring the bell. So we're here to try and find what the issues are and to find solutions for them.
Okay, so that's
different.
Without wanting to gender stereotype, I'm going to do that and wonder if perhaps men sometimes are a little bit more resistant to the counselling methodologies. Is that?
From my experience, the answer to that is a resounding yes, they are. Yeah, men prefer to, okay, if there's an issue, we want to resolve it, let's get it done. They don't want to have a talk fest for the next 2 years or whatever. And they don't like delving into the past because they've forgotten most of it because it's unimportant, a lot of these things, in their logic. So all of a sudden we're talking about something that happened 10 years ago. They're going, when was that?
Okay, yes.
That's where relationship mediation does shine because it acknowledges the issues, what they are, but we're not going to go delve into why they happen. We're saying to ourselves, okay, we've got this issue, how do we fix it? How do we move forward?
Okay.
And being a transformational mediation model, it means that we can discuss the issues, come up with various options, and then discuss the options to find out which one's suitable as a solution.
Okay. That's fascinating, and I do want to go back into that transformational model you mentioned a little bit more. But before we do that, I always like to get a little bit of background. So, if you could remember, what caused you to decide to become a professional mediator, is that something you're able to share with the listeners?
I can share it, but it's not what probably most people would think it will be. Approximately 10 years ago, I separated from my 30-year marriage and we had to have a mediation. I didn't know what mediation was. It was all new to me and I was like a lamb to slaughter, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed going in. It was about a 3-hour mediation and the mediator did what he thought he was doing was the correct thing and running around talking and passing messages backwards and forwards. And I'm thinking, yeah, it's a pretty cushy job. And then I got the bill for $750 and so did my ex. And I thought, well, that's $500 an hour. I can do that. That started the ball rolling. And of course I had a sea change because I was ill for some time. and I was IT, networking and security. And, you know, a couple of years out of that industry is a couple of lifetimes. So I had to reskill in something. And here's a nice, you know, comfortable way of doing it, reasonable hours, good pay. I thought, well, give it a go. Here I am.
Excellent. One thing I picked up on what you said, you said something like he thought he was doing a good job. Was there a bit of an undercurrent in there, or what?
Well, knowing what I know now about mediation, there's a huge undercurrent in there. It was a shuttle mediation, and I'm not really a fan of shuttle mediations because, you know, of what they call Chinese whispers. You know, what you say to the mediator may not necessarily be what's said to the other party.
It was shuttle, but I'm thinking that there probably wasn't a huge security risk between you and.
No, there wasn't.
Yeah.
Initially, it was opening statements all at the same room together with our solicitors and what have you. And once the opening statements were done, it was heard off into separate rooms, and the mediator ran backwards and forwards getting fit. But with that process, he I shouldn't go into too much detail here because if she who must be obeyed is listening, she'll probably execute me. But yeah, with the process, my solicitor and this mediator knew themselves reasonably well. They were sort of, well, almost drinking buddies, so to speak. And the other solicitor was a brand new one, unexperienced in all this sort of stuff. Yeah, she didn't fare too well in the mediation process. I keep getting reminded that even this day that, you know, it wasn't fair.
Yes, I do know that you maintain a ongoing relationship with your ex-wife, and she's
Well, it
quite
took
vocal.
2 years before we could actually start talking to each other. Before then, if you put us both in a room, one of us would probably leave alive, and I wouldn't bet on who that would be either. We were both quite upset with what had happened, and it took about 2 years and family to sort of bring us back together and make us sane again. And since then, we've redeveloped the friendship, but only a friendship, nothing further.
So I'm wondering if that experience was maybe a little bit of an impetus for your interest in relationship mediation, because it sounds like it was on the other end of the spectrum from.
Yeah, if we'd had intervention earlier in the piece, I think we'd possibly still be together. It was a case that there was like a perfect storm occurred in our relationship, and it needed something to diffuse it, but instead we got hit with a tsunami, and that's what destroyed it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, and I'm not meaning to pry too much into your own personal history, but it's just interesting the various reasons that people decide to become mediators. So.
Well, let me also say this. Once I started doing the course and understanding mediation a lot more, I did develop a passion for it very, very quickly. It turned from this could be a good idea into, oh my God, this is my epiphany, this is my future. And I love the subject with a passion, and that's why I enjoy teaching it and helping students get through it as well. But as far as the relationship breakdown, every time I think back on it, and I now know relationship mediation, I always think, yeah, it could have helped it. I don't think counselling would have, because it would have taken too long, and the tsunami was almost on us.
Yeah.
So it had to be sort of, you know, cut short real quick. Otherwise, it would have been, yeah, the same result. So I keep thinking back on that and thinking, how would it have gone?
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, yeah, it'd be great if life was one of those pick your own ending books and you could go back and rerun it, but unfortunately it doesn't quite work that way, does it?
No, I think I'd prefer to have a TARDIS.
Fair enough. A Whovian we have here.
A Whovian, that's correct. Yeah, go back and give myself the lotto numbers. That'd be a good starting point, wouldn't it?
It would. So I guess what we do have an opportunity though is to give the benefit of your hindsight to new entrants into the mediation industry. So I'm just wondering if there's one or two tips that you'd perhaps be willing to share with people that are just starting out in as mediators.
You mean just starting out in the course, or just starting out in their?
No, well, I guess finish. Well, I don't know wherever you think would be helpful. But
Okay, well, let's say you've done all the wonderful training, you now set your shingle up and you're now starting to get clients coming in. One of the first little tips I'd like to give people is when you first meet the couple, if they're non-combative, do whatever you can to try and put them at ease. And what I do personally, if they're non-combative, is since we all get in the same room for the mediation, I'll drag them down to the kitchen to make a cup of coffee. And by doing that, I'm not talking about anything about the mediation. It's about the footy, the weather, whatever, any subject except why they're there. Go down, get the cup of coffee, cup of tea, whatever, then bring them back. By the time they get back, a lot of the anxiety has started to ease off. And I find that's a really good way of trying to get them to calm down. Because if you look at it this way, you go into this mediation, and it's a family law mediation, either parenting or property, it doesn't make much difference. So you get up in the morning, and of course you're now very anxious because sometime today you're going to have this mediation, and in this mediation your whole future can be determined. So you get yourself ready, you get yourself dressed, you jump in your car, you drive into where the mediation is, and it's usually in the city or something like that. So you're fighting peak hour traffic getting in there. You then have trouble finding a car park, and you end up finding one which costs you $85 for the day, which really makes you really impressed. You then got a 20-minute walk to the building, wherever it is, almost getting lost getting there. By now, your anxiety is starting to really build. You get into the lift, you go up to the floor it's on or wherever it is. You go into reception, and there's total strangers you've never seen before. And you're led into a room, and in the room is the other half. Now, at that point in time, that exact second in time, most people would prefer to have a root canal without anaesthetic than be standing in that position. So it's very important to calm them down, get them to relax a little bit. I don't care how you do it, but I find dragging them off with a coffee, being personable with them, talking about anything except the mediation and why they're there, does help sort of take the stress off them.
yeah. Okay. Look, I think that's amazingly good advice. And really what's underneath all of that advice is really putting yourself into the client's shoes. So, having empathy, really thinking about what the experience is like for them, coming into the mediation, but all the way through it. It's something that we as mediators ask our clients to do. But perhaps it's something that can slip our attention as
well. The next thing I like doing as well, and this is with the same sort of philosophy in mind, is about every 45 minutes thereabout, I'll go, I feel like another coffee, let's go, and I'll drag them down the kitchen again.
Okay, so you're breaking that state wherever, particularly if it's gotten
well,
to.
Several reasons involved in doing that. The first one is, if someone wants to use the toilets or something, they can use that to do it.
Yeah.
They can stretch their legs a little bit. They're taken out of the mediation space, so whatever's been said to date can start to settle into their thought patterns. But the more important issue is that people have attention spans, and even mediators have attention spans. When you're a kid at school, the classes were like 20 minutes long. When you get to university, they're about 40, 50 minutes long.
Yeah.
Why? Because that's the length of your attention span. Anything more than that, it's just words going in one ear, out the other, and you're not listening to anything. So just giving a small break every 45 minutes, thereabouts, at an opportune time. You don't go 10, 9, 8, let's go. At an opportune time, you take them out for stretch their legs. It gives them a chance to settle in what they've learned, to take on another session for another 45 minutes or so.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's wonderful. Now, look, I know that people are really interested in finding out more about this transformational relationship mediation that you're doing. What's the difference between that and the basic facilitative mediation that everyone learns when they become nationally accredited or in their
okay. There's a couple of small differences that I personally take on this. The first one is with a facilitative model. there's the I can't give advice, I can't give an opinion, I can't say who's right or wrong. In the transformative model, you can give a little bit of advice, but it's got to be more general and specific to exactly what's happening in the room at the time to help them move along. You're
Okay.
not sitting there just expecting them to do everything. So it is a bit more of a guiding hand through the
Right.
process.
Okay. Could you maybe give a bit of an example of the
But to give an example would be like in a facilitative model, if a person's had a computer dumped on their desk and they don't know how to use it, you can't say, have you thought about getting training? Because that's giving advice basically.
Mm.
But in the transformative model, we can say, well, if you don't know how to use the computer, have you thought of getting training or getting the next door neighbour's 12-year-old to show you how to use it? We
Right.
can get some sort of advice at that sort of level. We're not giving advice as in legal advice because we're not lawyers. We're not giving financial advice because we're not financial advisors. But
Mm.
we can give general advice on things which help them see the trees because that's stopping them seeing the forest, or help
Okay.
the forest because of trees and road, whichever it is.
So, just and correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just trying to get my head around what you're saying. So, is it more like people are just blocked and stuck in that dynamic that they've got in their relationship, and they're just not able to see options, and so
Exactly. That is the case in most times. I've come across with myself here with that. They're looking at the problem. They can't see the solutions because their emotions are in the road.
mm,
That happens so many times. It's almost countless.
yeah,
I've had relationship mediations where I've had some very highly qualified people in the room
mm,
who you'd think would know better,
yeah,
but they couldn't see the forest because all the trees are in the road.
yeah,
And once you could get them to spot that the forest is the trees, they started coming to realise and taking their own advice a bit better. I mean, how many times have you or a friend you've gone to a friend and said, oh, I've got these problems or something. The friend goes, oh, that's easy, do this, this and this.
mm,
You go, oh yeah, I never thought of that.
yeah,
But you knew it. But
mm,
because you're so close to the problem, you couldn't see it.
okay,
And as
right,
a
yeah,
mediator, we're that person saying, we've tried this, this and this to try and get
mm,
them to think around the problem.
yeah,
Some people say, we've got to think outside the box. Well, I say, let's get the box and throw it away. Now let's look at the problem. Let's look at solutions.
okay. So really looking at helping them to think about in terms of their relationship, their lives, what it would mean to them rather than set pieces, I suppose.
It's all about getting them to see the issues logically and to be able to move forward without the emotional content holding them back. Then you've got different personality types, of course, which can cause issues in this sort of environment too. But we've got to stay on top of that by using just pure logic, really. I mean, what's the problem? The problem is A. Okay, what options do we have which can solve A?
Yeah.
But before we even get to that stage, one of the things that I'm really big on is getting the parties to understand exactly what their issue is, why it's an issue, what they think is causing the issue, and what impact it's having on them.
Okay.
And to get
So
to explain all that to their partner, so their partner now understands why it's an issue and what impact it's having on them. Now, when you
yeah.
have that information, it's easier to come up with solutions or options.
Okay. Yeah. And look, I was going to ask you about that because one of the things I heard you saying a lot was acknowledgement, and you're not going to get acknowledgement unless well, you're not going to feel acknowledged unless you feel that the person has actually understood what the issue is.
Yeah.
So if you've got, what the issue is, why it's an issue, what impact it's having on them, and what was the other thing?
What the issue is, why it's an issue,
Mm-hmm.
and what impact it's having on them. The three basic core things you need to understand.
Yeah.
If you understand what your partner's issue is on those three levels, and then you've got to explain your side back to the partner, your three issues or your three versions of that issue as well, then it's easier for people to say, well, okay, I understand now that you don't like this because of, well, if we
Mm.
do it this way, we don't have that. How would that go?
Yeah, no, look, that would absolutely break the dynamic, because the classic thing is, as soon as someone raises an issue, the other person's thinking, oh, you're complaining again, and they start to justify or excuse or belittle or whatever they do.
And that's why the mediator here is so important, because when we get them to raise their issues in their opening statements,
yeah,
that's why we ask them some questions. We delve into what they're saying so we get a better handle on it. And also we summarise it back to them to make sure that we understand it and they feel acknowledged because they've been heard.
yeah,
But also, even though their partner may have, while they were talking, thought, here we go again, but as soon as the mediator's reiterating it back, they're listening to the mediator and going, I never thought of it that way, or whatever. So the mediator in that situation becomes a focal point to a person who would otherwise, I've heard this before, I'm not interested, what time is it? Let me count the freckles on the back of my hand, all sorts of things, except paying attention.
Wait till they stop talking and then it's my turn. Yep.
Yeah. So the mediator asking the questions, and of course the other party's going, yeah, that's a good question, what's your answer to that? Huh? That's what they're thinking. Then you summarise it back so they get a better understanding of the problems there. So once we then, and by the way, we put an agenda together, but I don't call it an agenda. I ignore the word agenda.
Yeah.
Still work it. It's the exact same thing.
Yeah.
I just ignore it. I just go, well, listen to what you both said, and I'll put a few points down here, what we should be discussing today.
Okay.
Have I got them right? Have I missed anything? What order would you like to discuss these in? And let's keep going.
Okay, so you...
Everything except the word agenda, because the word agenda becomes, this is a formal meeting. I've got to, sit up straight, cross my hands, and
okay. So it's part of the process of relaxing them and helping them to have a conversation.
Yeah. And also, don't be afraid to ask the difficult questions either.
That can be a challenge. So, do you want to expand a little bit more on that? What is that? Is that sort of the elephant in the room type questions?
Well, there can be elephant in the room type questions, and if you don't address them, the elephant's still going to be in the room when they leave, and any solution they've got is going to probably fall apart.
Okay.
Unless they address what the real issues are. Now, what are some of the things, hypothetically, that would come up in a relationship mediation? Well, it could be allocation of, household tasks. It could be, career conflicts. I'm working and you're off, and when you're working, I'm off, and we never see each other. Communication issues where they're not actually communicating properly. Could be a religious thing, conflicts there. Extramarital affairs, family friend relationship conflicts. I mean, how many people have issues with their mother-in-laws? I mean, a few. Not all.
We've had a new inquiry come through with a lady who's got a gentleman friend who she says is completely platonic, but there's certainly some issues in the family.
Yep, family issues always come in handy there. Financial disputes. I mean, the biggest breakup cause of marriages, I believe, is financial over anything else, because it puts such a strain on every other facet of the relationship. You've got intimacy issues, living arrangement conflicts, and different parenting responsibilities. All these things can be covered in a relationship mediation, plus anything else that comes along.
Right. Now, one thing is there a requirement that they both want to remain in the relationship?
Yes, there is.
Yeah, because with FDR, you're often going to be faced with someone who says they want to keep the relationship and the other one, nah, not happening.
Well, the way that it handles in this model, you still have intakes. When the intake you do your suitability and safety, maybe to not the same degree, but you still do it though to make sure it's still suitable to go ahead.
Yeah.
But one of the very first questions you ask is, in the intake, whether by themselves, do you want this relationship to continue, yes or no?
So very point blank.
Point blank. And even though you do it in the intake, you do it again also at the beginning of the actual mediation.
Yeah.
As part of your mediator's opening statements, which are abbreviated, I just want to ask you both again, do you wish this relationship to continue? and you'll
Okay.
get a yes and yes out of both of them. But if you get a yes and a no, well, there's not much point in continuing the mediation,
Okay.
because it takes two to make a relationship, but only one to break it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what the sad truth. I mean, if one could, keep it because they wanted to, that means one's forced into something they don't want. No, it doesn't work. So as soon as one says, no, I don't want it to continue, then the mediation can't happen.
No. Okay. And then they need to decide if they want to go to family dispute resolution and
yeah, which we can help them with referrals there. Now, also too, don't forget that relationship mediation can work hand in hand with counselling too. I mean, the relationship mediation may, stop the tsunami from hitting them, so they can now get a breath, and maybe counselling could be a thing they require. Well, being a mediator, if that becomes obvious, we can make referrals for them, so to go for further counselling. Or if a person has an issue, like it might be drug, alcohol, or whatever, we can also refer them to counselling on that.
Yeah, so it's okay, and so quite often people might get in the right headspace where they're actually willing to consider counselling for some of the deeper seated things that they need to shift.
But it's got to be put to them in a way, like in relationship mediation, it becomes easier to put it to them, because it becomes like that could become a deal breaker to staying together or whatever. And they then have to seriously think, well, what do they wish to do? And if they do want to stay together, well, maybe they, will have to go along with counselling.
Yeah. But they have a better understanding of the impact of the issues on their partner, and maybe they'll go in a better head frame rather than just feeling like they're being blamed. And
oh, exactly, and that's apparent quite often. Yes, it's not a blame thing. Here's a cause and effect.
Yeah.
To stop this effect, we get rid of the cause.
Yeah.
It's not rocket science.
Yeah, but if it's just not visible if you've got all of that emotion overlaying and anger and upset.
If a blame game's been thrown at you, and it's all your fault because you drink too much or whatever, you're going to become defensive, and after a while I'll become immune to it.
Yeah.
So with relationship mediation, it's okay, why is it an issue to you that your partner drinks? What effects it having on you? The why, what, when, where, and how type questions we can delve into it with.
Yeah. Look, I was going to mention that when you were talking about asking questions as the mediator, and I know that's something that you're really big on when you're mentoring the five W's.
Yep. What, why, when, where, and how. How ends with a W, just in case anyone listening is trying to figure out what's happening there. Yeah, they're 5 questions which will always give you a detailed response. They're not closed questions, they're open questions. So someone might say, look, I just don't trust him. Well, why don't you trust him? What would it take to trust him? When would you know you can trust him? There's 3 questions instantly off the key word of what they just said.
Yeah.
W it, and bang. 3 questions which will dive into further and more detail on that particular thing, but also it doesn't bring in new information.
Yeah.
And that's the core bit too, because you don't want to bring new information in.
No, because we're not trying to counsel people, we're trying to mediate. So it's about trying to get understanding, increase understanding. Yes, maybe raise options and things that they hadn't considered, but ultimately it's around what they want.
Yeah,
I imagine, because the principle of self-determination is still central to the process. I'd assume.
Well, mediation is that we can help a little bit with transformative mediation, but at the same time we're not telling them they have to, because it's their mediation. They can walk out of it whenever they want to. If they feel uncomfortable, they can say, look, I feel uncomfortable, that's it, all over, and they can walk out. There's nothing stopping them doing that.
Yeah, and so this process, I know when we were chatting before, you'd mentioned that it's got quite a long history in overseas in some places.
Well, it's big in America. They've been doing it for quite a few years, and one of my colleagues has actually done some of it here in Australia. Not much, but he has done a little bit. It's also starting off in New Zealand. It's getting bigger there. And I believe England's doing it and some of Europe's also doing it, but I'm not too sure on the figures there. But America, it's big.
Yeah.
In America, they call it family mediation, which includes relationship mediation, parenting, and property.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's one big umbrella for the three different things. So if you're looking for it in a web page, it's called Family Mediation. And you'll see a lot of stuff on what we call parenting and property, but also occasionally you'll see the relationship stuff coming in.
Yeah, so I suppose the family dispute resolution role kind of changes things here a little bit because it is legislated and
Yep.
focused around the separation more so than than the possible reconciliation or rebuilding. It occurs to me that relationship mediation could work quite well for co-parenting as well, when it not about where the child spends time or whatever, but on trying to improve that relationship. Any thoughts about that?
It can improve there. I would have no hesitation saying it can. It's also good for even sibling issues. It's good for uncles and nephews and grandparents and grandchildren. Whatever relationship out there you have which involves people, when there's conflict, it can help.
And to people that want to improve that relationship, I guess.
Yeah, not give up on it.
The prerequisite.
No, if you don't want to give up, then it's worth fighting for.
Yeah. Okay.
So yes, it can help with two people help co-parent.
Okay. Now that's great.
Let me put it this way: relationship mediation has three focuses. The first focus is future focused.
Yeah.
The next one is solution focused, obviously, because you've got to get solutions out of it.
Yeah.
And the third one is child focused, if there's children involved.
Yeah. Okay. So saying, how do you think that's impacting the kids and
yeah, we don't want to put or even encourage, solutions which are going to disadvantage the children.
Yeah.
We do have that sort of responsibility there.
Yeah, so just picking up on that point of solution focused, what do you do in terms of agreement for people if they do reach agreement on things?
If they reach an agreement, basically what I do is I try and format it more of like a to-do list.
Okay.
They don't have to sign it, but they can pin it to their fridge, and that's their action plan to solve their relationship issues.
Okay.
Well, maybe not pin it to the fridge if there's children or any other people around, but they can stick it somewhere. They can keep referring back to it, like, we agreed to do this. Yeah. Okay, let's do it.
Okay, so and that could be things like, I don't know, date night if they're feeling like they're they're not giving time to their relationship or whatever it is they agree to.
Once a week we'll have a date night. So, okay, when this week are we having a date night? Well, what do you mean date night? Here's the agreement. See, you agreed to a date night. Oh yeah, we did, didn't we? Yeah.
Yeah, and look, it's easy enough for people to forget what they were intending to do or just lose focus.
Yeah.
And I guess that's coming back once again to the empathy and putting yourself in people's shoes.
And also too, with relationship mediation, you can have a second one a few months down the track if you wish. Now, I mean, a lot of relationships might have more than one issue, but they might have a core issue, which is a deal breaker.
Okay.
Let's deal with that now so we don't break the relationship.
Yeah.
But there could be other things they wish to discuss down the track as well. So there's nothing stopping them doing additional mediations. And if something's not working out properly for them, they wish to discuss it further, they can also get a second mediation to do that if they wish. Okay. But one of the things we try and do is also identify ways they can move forward if anything else raises its head and how to deal with it. We're teaching the skills also in this, how to deal with additional problems if they come along. And that's, by the way, we do it. And we sort of emphasise, okay, if it's happened again, how would you deal with this sort of question?
Okay. All right. Yeah. So because we're in the context of an ongoing relationship, I can imagine that skills building and agreeing on behavioural compacts or whatever you want to call it would be would be really important.
If they're having a lot of issues, anger issues, we would recommend an anger management course, which I think MI's got one of those. There's also the new ways for families if they're having other communication issues there, which could be handy for them.
Yep.
So we've got these other educational facilities available, which if they feel justified in doing it, they can do it as well to help their relationship.
One of the things that people often complain about interventions with relationships that they feel like the facilitator takes aside, which can be seen as a bit of a downside sometimes with counselling, and it certainly shouldn't happen with a really skilled counsellor. But
and the same applies with mediation. There's some mediators out there a bit biased. I've met one of those in the past, a long time ago, without mentioning names. But our role as a mediator, we have to be neutral in the whole process.
Yep.
And the way I look at that is, it's going to sound cold and heartless, but it's not really. It's not my problem.
Yeah.
It's their problem, and what I'm hearing is more or less their versions of their truth. So it's nothing more to me than maybe a bit more than, say, gossip or something like that, but I'm here to help them through what they believe into what's actually happening to try and find a solution to it.
Yeah, and look, that
helps there.
Yeah, that's a good tip for maintaining neutrality. Is remembering it's this is not our problem. We don't need to get emotionally involved in the problem, and what they're telling us is their version. It's not necessarily
well, two people can look at the same thing and come up with different answers. And it's because of their paradigm, the way they see the world. They see this as this way, and the other person sees it as something different. And yeah, it gets down to the four people in a relationship, doesn't it?
Yeah, the four people.
Yeah, it's what I think I do is what I think you do, and is what you think you do, and is what you think that I do. If they get out of kilter, guess what? We've got problems.
Yeah, and and then you're having expectation problems, which is, I guess, really what we're talking about with relationship mediation, isn't it?
Yeah, and love language is another issue they have as well. I had that issue in my relationship. Like every time my ex got sick, she wanted to be left alone. And I'd try and, mother her.
Yeah.
And I'd get, if a drunken sailor was walking past, he'd probably blush with some of the language. But with me, I like to be babied. I even bought a little bell. That lasted one ring before it almost ended up somewhere very, well, it shouldn't.
Uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable. That didn't work at all for me.
No. No.
So that's called love language. So if I understood that she wanted to be left alone and I left her alone, everything would be happy. If she understood I wanted to be mothered and she, brought me the occasional cup of coffee or something, everything would be happy.
Okay. So really, having some of those resources, well, basically knowing those concepts yourself and being able to refer people to those sort of books or websites or courses or whatever, is an important part of
the ongoing understanding to keep the relationship together.
Yeah. And I suppose that's a part of where you were saying right at the start about putting in content in appropriate ways. So, sometimes letting people know about, well, what I'm hearing here is that it sounds like you're missing the mark in trying to show affection between the two of you. What you're saying, you want to be coddled and looked after when you're sick, and you're saying you want to be left alone. And when you're trying to do what's right for you for the other person, they're feeling very either not heard.
Yeah, that's what they used to call the golden rule, wasn't it? Do unto others as you expect unto yourself. Well, we've got to modify that and call it the platinum rule or something.
Yeah, which is treat others as they'd like to be treated, but you can't do that unless you ask them what they want.
Exactly.
And I guess that's an important part of the relationship mediation, isn't it? Giving people an opportunity to tell their partner or their family member or whoever what it is that they want from them.
Yeah.
And being willing to listen to what the other person wants. I have done a little bit of this sort of work as well. It can be really profound. Is that, just to, I guess, to wrap things up, is there any sort of final takeaway point you'd like to make?
Yeah, if your relationship is in trouble, this is for the client rather than the mediators. If your relationship's in trouble, you've got couples counselling you can do. You've now got relationship mediation as another tool in your arsenal. Now, as far as the mediators are concerned, having relationship mediation in your bag of tricks is a very handy process to have on board. Because quite often you'll have a situation where even on FDR, they'll come in the same car. And, their body language
where there's intervention orders and they've come in the same car.
And their body language is not a couple wishing to separate. And you're going, well, hang on a sec, do you really want to separate?
Yeah.
And they go, well, not really. It's just we don't think of anything else we can do.
Yeah.
Well, let's try relationship mediation instead. You've booked the time, let's do it.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. Okay, now excellent. Well, thank you very much, Ken. I really appreciate you sharing your insights around relationship mediation and some of the other things that we spoke of, and I'm sure the listeners will as well. If anyone wants to touch base with you afterwards or ask any questions, are you okay with me putting up links for your website and how to contact you? And
yeah, it's not a problem.
So on. Yeah. And you're are you happy to have a chat with someone if they want to ask further questions about
not a problem, Joe. If it's a mediator out there that wants to know more about it, that's fine. I'm more than welcome to give them my number to call me. I'll go through any questions they've got and help them out as much as I can.
Well, what if they've actually got an issue in their relationship or a client that they think they'd like to refer through to you?
They can do that as well.
Yeah. So you are taking on clients, are you?
Oh, I'm definitely taking on clients, yes.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's great.
I made a post last year saying 2019 is a complete restructure, and this restructure includes focusing on relationship mediation because it's so good, it works so well.
Okay. So it's something that you're really, really keen to.
Really passionate about, and I want to train as many people as I can because it works a treat, it really does.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you very much.
No worries. Thank you, Joe.